So Lama said first I'll read the small print at the end that was already explained, and then you please go ahead and ask questions at ease, and we'll just spend the rest of our time having discussion.
Questions?
Which of the crowd?
there was the Heruka, the Lama, the Dorje Changi Nama, the Heruka, Nama, the Joviori, Heruka Kangi Nama.
Herka Seria de Tai Chorwa, the Herka Zega, the Tare number 12, number Yarte, Dama, Zipan, Herka, and Kolodim John, Tokama, Tokanga, Wujin, Shawana, Shawan, Tokanga, Wujin, the Norok, Zedin recently in Bala. Then long che in Bala, Tare, Jones, the Jin, the Yarta, number Yonzo. Chuba get number da Guardian young gun and Jonesy Jonesy Chuba so no you but the Herka che Herka number.
Basically, he changes from being a peaceful Vajradhara into being slightly wrathful, a little bit like Chakrasambhara. Particularly, his fangs are slightly bared, like Chakrasambhara, and instead of the crown just of jewels, it's 5 skulls topped by jewels. And in general, the rest of the Sambhogakaya ornaments can remain more or less the same, but he exhibits these 9 moods of dance that are actually the musical modes in classical Indian music. You know, ku shengidre, penadencho bravo. So penadencho ke togala yapa ke wojendo chichang bravo. So he doesn't stand up. I asked if he stands up the way Chakrasambhara does. He says no, he's remained seated. So he looks like, if you go to the Guru Rinpoche shrine, there's Guru Rinpoche as Vajradhara, and he's slightly wrathful. It looks like that.
We have one online question. Does anybody have a question? There is an online question. It says, my understanding is that there are many different levels and types of samaya. Can Lama please explain the most basic core principle of samaya that we as practitioners need to fully understand?
Okay. The children so the dancing sewate de la rimpa mombo yosares. Then on the ngatso tsama ke the dampope ke kapso the so young topa goyang gopa ke dancing karayo.
Talam Gosan told Dijete Lukerum Gasa Kumbata, Nanga Dawata, something in the Sarja, then the Taterawata, Tijada Mepake, Tambichu, Tan Sahati, La Debatana, Yaposi, Tamse the Lota, Chorma Sama Tony, then it Diana Yangadorjin Chepon Chemo Kudo Tamjila, Chugawa Drabala. 같이 탑탑 그 예랑시 타바다 마도 제가 차도 리셈다 나테자레 드르히 효마송와 드르히게 셈데 저 희와다 두바다 들어와 드르히게 디전도 메바 바유 진시 라가 땡쟁한 로텀나 다테 레사큐나오리 다텔로 송마탑 오네 웬 사포마 메반다오리 드르르 긴도다 대근 대고 대기 전화서 셈나 오늘 핀톤 좀 그래.
Fundamentally, the samaya is considered observance of the Guru's body, speech, and mind. But what that means is that you observe the Guru's body by by formally practicing the generation stage and by maintaining the attitude that all appearances are the body of the Guru and deity inseparable. You observe the Guru's speech by reciting mantra and by maintaining the attitude that all sound is the speech of the Guru and mantra inseparable. And you maintain the Guru's mind by practicing meditation and by maintaining the attitude that all thoughts are the display of the Guru and deity inseparable's wisdom. On a general level, the most important thing is to maintain faith in and devotion for the Vajrayana teachings, and therefore also those who teach them and others who practice them. And that brings us to the issue of samaya with Dharma siblings or brothers and sisters. With regard to one's Dharma brothers and sisters, it's important to maintain a positive attitude, which is to say benevolence, affection, and especially to be free from jealousy or competitiveness. The overall principle behind all of this is mindfulness and vigilance, but particularly in the mindfulness and vigilance in a pure outlook.
What is the difference between faith and devotion?
Debadan mugu ki cheba karere.
Deba da mu ni sen fe ma lin da wo ri. Deba se ya de la na ba ma mo yo de dang we deba dan de be deba de yi chi be deba. Den de deba de la dan de yi chi ji deba na ba som zo dang we deba de le la won da wo ri ma che ki len jo ko ri le la wo ri de yi ya la wo ri phan ro ro la wo ri pe cha ya na ta da cha ran zo la na ne la ya po ren nan do la ge ya po ren ji na la sang hop de ka la very amazing sound the len Lama right check Sarparentina very amazing lap and what then our taste is a sensitive very chakari chaka here in the indocari down with Deva Zelender. Then in the Deva de Sanji Cosanto on the Intele Hijata, Yichi Deva in Jorame Bagazava Lama de Cosanto Salap Cosanto on the Hina, Taco to Navian Jordo Zavanini, Mewatella. Ta yichi deba asayari te dandu yichi deba tela tin mula jama chipa namya jorwa meba yi tungi wanda wata namya nga lama koncho yi la darwa meba ra tin de sena pe tongwa dan jipo dan zeba kare zogo leo ha lepa heke telen duba che saung re je jo re te ta te zo te well,
faith and devotion are definitely, Lama said, in the same family. They're very closely related. Faith, or Shraddha, is defined in Buddhism as of three types. And it's important to understand these because they are three aspects of what we normally think of as faith. And they also have different degrees of stability that, if understood, help you understand how faith leads to devotion. The first type of faith that we generally experience is called awe or wonderment. And wonderment or awe is, as the word implies, very much an emotional state. So, for example, when you go into a shrine room and you see the images, you may feel something, some wonder, a feeling of attraction and a kind of overwhelming inspiration. That is, it is the easiest type of faith, Lama said, to acquire because it is emotional. But for the same reason, it's also the most unstable. The problem that we have with that faith is that when we feel that, we think, oh, that's faith. That's wonderful. Now I've got faith. But the problem is, like any other emotional state, it vanishes after a few days. You feel that wonder when you first see these things, but then you get used to them. And then you stop feeling it. And so wonder or awe is important, but it's also highly unstable. The second type of faith is desire, which means the actual wish to achieve the results of Buddhahood. So whereas the object of wonder is either an individual, like a teacher, or an image, a painting or statue or something, the object of faith as desire is the fruition, the state of Buddhahood. And desire is really wanting to become a Buddha, wanting what a Buddha has, wanting that result. It is also somewhat emotional because it is desire, it is wanting something, but it's more stable, it's more long lasting because it's something that you keep on wanting. And therefore it's less dependent on stimuli. The problem with the faith that is awe is as soon as you stop feeling it, then it's gone. But if you really want Buddhahood, that want is not going to go away as easily. And then the third type of faith is belief. And that is the really believing in the truth of the teachings, and believing in the attributes of your guru, for example. And belief is the most stable because it's the most, in a sense, the most cognitive, the least emotional. You believe what you believe. You may feel good or bad at any given moment, but your beliefs don't change just because of that. Whereas awe and desire can fluctuate. So generally, there is an idea that there is a gradation in stability. We begin with awe, and we continue to experience that periodically, but we don't rely upon that alone. Then we give rise to desire, wanting Buddhahood, and then belief, belief is certainty in the sense that when you really believe something, you can't be shaken unless there's proof of its opposite. Now it's the belief, while the awe, the first faith, may sound the most like devotion, it's actually the belief that is solid and unchanging enough that it leads to devotion. And devotion is when your belief in the teachings and those who teach them is so unshakable that it is independent of input. So it's completely, it sustains, it's self-sustaining. That's devotion.
I have a question. I wonder if Lama could talk a little bit about courage in doing these practices, because the practice that we just talked about is pretty advanced.
Mm-hmm.
But even for a basic yidam practice,
Mm-hmm.
If you're really doing it, it requires a kind of courage. And I took Lama's advice from yesterday
Mm-hmm.
and applied it to my practice this morning, and it gave me courage to sort of have this supplication.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder if you could expound a little bit on that.
Tata Nyingto Sempawape Keshare. Tata the Chenoza Matsoke Nyanlan Karezona Nyingtoko. Pena Derene Sompake Ladro de la Kesha Tompo Mongoyo, Zalung Tile La Sopa Kesha Tompo. Ngazo lelam popeke kapsa de lamsang hako tokna hako tokmari. Dendo hako man tokna nyamlen zona nyingtoko. De kasong ke kaden shuba danshin ke dache dan dunche la sopa ke trawa ke kola mo ke nyamlen la pencils. Di nyingtok pay la pencils. Dendo da ngazo ke cherem gompe kapsa yinandre, la menaje gompe kapsa yinandre. Nyingtok ke koteson.
Tere, one demari, that taking around the sand a bit cheap or Johnson. Ningdog gory, ningdog, ningru, ningler, but tomorrow you person you love the source on the Ningru the gory, Ningru Tanan, Mina, Chu, Duyat, Omar. Ningru the Zondu the bay, Halebari. Then the Ningru maybe mother Sanjay Thompson say Omar, Sanjay Kora Tambo Ningder by the Ningru and the Kaki, Kawajatama, Tomba members of Sanjay already. Then I get top time you can load your rumba and the kid, Nirita, Gori. Nara Tambo, one Naranga Nirita, Haleva, say something, Lottery, Tambo, country city association. Nara Amika, Gonzala Michalor and other marches on Tambo Mala. The cups cup they do, pinching Naropa, Telopa, the Tinsarilla. Sancho Sambata, and Chumpa Din and Rosai, Namtadeg. Nga hat leva hi sen drona kis ya da drama te ngala deba muse ya ngala dikaps kare go hiko mari nga me ni chiman disa aw tandra lama te tandra chu da za chen bo na ndru go ho re sam do ko ndra ngone ri demba ri sam do ko ndra tandra ki keso di jin ngara cham dule kapsa da Milarepa gan garna ni nga donha kawo mari nga pe tizang pechiri nga na kipori yarbo na yeri te donha kawo mari to Milarepa garna ni khon tambo thakar ta so da nyamne se ni yob ne kap so da semo da peta te injali kap se teni jin khon ke damja we ne lo som damja we ne yob ne khon gan gar song de damja gan gar de kar song de sina nga kipa ni kum ma chorwa dawa drive ma chorwa return daran chen namjar samba tobai gola meji me bar nana thaji me bar return daran chen namjar samba zobai rorum bai sawa da zaju drabi ji ba return daran chen namjar samba zobai karsang temo teso me bar karsang teme me bar darsang teso me bar return daran chen namjar samba zobai song de ngore song da tamja wa de ne ko yora nga te hyoge ga ni aw nga da ong thom da kan ra ya san de yang yang cha jing ni dong yang nga lon ro so de ne de ta ba dong ke yu den ri nga yong thob hyo nga de ri ke re thu ri ne ngo ne ta ne ta pho no na ko le tin dai thon ni nga de ri ke chu ban nam da ri tho kyo san ne nga ha le ba ke de de tro ra ke so de ra ji zong zhe me ben ma la yong di na me je a ma de nga de 참자던 딜롱바다 카면도 되는도 그러나 충은 되는 배 지나는 아긴도 지도 차크면도 딜롱바데 지 독서야 돼 롱바데 말이 지 독서야 돼 차하면도 대사를 가게 칸데 여기 촉촉한다고 대사 가게 칸데 동을 촉촉한다고 다 들으시게 지도 총이 마차들 효침보다데 초라서 롱바데 담보 그 롱바 코라게 되는 지견도 롱바 코라 다 연나고 기본도 칸바 기본 니사 기본 땡게 기본 사제 기본 되게 지도도 좋아하면도 되게 인르시 터면도 마도 제게 다중아 그 공리 휴바데 다다 레소볼로 yap세게 제름 로주니 검스 제름 로주니 검스야 가서 다다 제름 검바나기 말이다 세 제도 님 재미는 단 yer meba biden lo kyuni lo gong ko de kong na ba gong ni ma che nga tren le ka yu gong no mi pha cha nga tren ka ma sum sar tu chu de lo gong ya ke ta sa nya nga weekend la chi chu ni la hu de ni nga yang party lan ro ko yang nga ro pa la to ko nga la tu chu mi sam de ro ni ke tu da sa bo le yu de jie to ko ma le yong de jie to ko ma ni lu zo de nga da da sha na lu di to ndan 상계의 송로 나 다다 공디 디토 샤르 셰장롱 셰장롱 제장롱 산초 마토기 파르다 띵드는가 뭐요 손은 담자 대회는 산제 상계요. 더 던지게 그 니르다 당나오는 오늘 산제 공부하고 보면서 대면은 톱주 레하고 말이다. 네.
I'm very glad that you asked that question. Courage is really necessary. We actually pray for courage. A common prayer in many devotional liturgies is, grant your blessings so that I generate or grow a bone in my heart. We don't literally mean that you form a calcium deposit or other bone in the center of your heart. That wouldn't be good. But it means that you harden yourself in the sense that you become impervious to the fluctuation of a circumstance. And it seems that without that courage, we can't be diligent. And without diligence, we can't achieve Buddhahood. So no one has ever achieved Buddhahood without courage, because the starting point of the path is that you dare to challenge samsara, that you dare to achieve a Buddhahood. You know, like for example, when the Buddha was achieving the Buddhahood, first thing Mara said to him was, "How dare you? You know, how could you dare to even think of escaping me?" And so, daring is necessary. I first understood this. Well, Lama said, I can't say I really understood it, but I was touched by the story. When my grandfather was teaching the words of my perfect teacher, and he got to the point that describes how the Pandit Naropa and also the Bodhisattva Chibak relied upon spiritual friends, the exertion, courage that they displayed. And it made me cry. Of course, I didn't completely understand the point, but I realized then that such fortitude, such earnestness is necessary. Later, when I was in retreat and reading the songs of Gyamtso Milarepa, I became very fond of one of his songs, which is his song of promises or vows that he sang to his sister, Petapom, when he was in retreat early on at Drakar Tasso. And basically he says, may I spend the rest of my life in retreat and die in this retreat without anyone knowing, without anyone caring, without enemies, without friends, without people even hearing that I have died. If this yogi's life can be conducted and end in that way, I will have fulfilled my most heartfelt ambition. And I memorized that song after reading it a couple of times and it's always present in my mind. Now, it's not that I was undergoing any particular hardship at the time. In fact, if I look back, I think I was probably something of a spoiled child. But nevertheless, I was inspired by Gyamtso Milarepa's example. It seems that it is this point of courage that it is most difficult for people here. And I don't think you're really to blame for this. I think it's a natural result of the circumstances of your upbringing. Because for one thing, there's so much physical comfort in this, so much, by the standards of most of the world, so much luxury and consumption. And the other aspect of it is that in this culture, at this point, you're taught to pay a great deal of attention to your feelings, to how you feel. Do I feel good or do I feel bad? And the problem with appraising everything we're doing based upon transitory feelings, like do I feel good or do I feel bad, is it makes us fluctuate in our commitment to things, even things we've decided to do, very, very easily. We become very, very permeable by conditions. And it sets us up for failure in practice, because in order to practice one-pointedly, you have to be beyond caring how you feel. For example, yesterday I mentioned that Arya Nagarjuna and Aryadeva, his heart son, each practiced the generation stage of their Gidam, Gurya Samaja, for 12 years, one-pointedly, before going on to the isolation of body at the beginning of the completion stage. And when I say they practiced it for 12 years, I don't mean 12 years of what we think of as practice. Practice to us is, well, today I'm working, so maybe I've got 3 minutes here, there, I'll do a little bit, you know. And then the weekend's coming. I can do more on the weekend, but oh, no, I've got that party to go to, and then I've got to meet so-and-so, and you know, there's just, I'll try to squeeze some in somewhere. That's not what they did. When they practiced for 12 years, it means day and night, one-pointedly, 24/7. And that kind of one-pointed focus requires, as you indicated in your question, tremendous courage. You have to have enough courage that you are impervious to circumstances, that you're not hard-hearted in the sense of being uncompassionate, but you're hard-hearted in the sense of being uncompromising. And you have to have the attitude, I don't care. If I get sick, I get sick. If I die, I die. If my body explodes into 1,000 pieces, fine. You know, if the building falls down on my head, fine. I'm going to keep on. And that kind of hard-headed imperviousness is necessary.
담비추도 zonrisia ngone sonam chembori cheranso ngaso ngone phaine tambo chi kona ga logic chi cheranso told posing the drama the remando de goya o mari nga gma zaidan zogo zon ke da hie ke yo mari then the logic hie ko ri nga ga lama mambo la cheranso go gomde tin ya gi ten yo mari ngone yo mari de cheranso divsa loma gi divsa tin na gi gomde tin ro lama mambo ten yo mari ngone sarolari pajar sheep leather zamato yomari then ngaso loma tamjila tenjo kawayo sado tenjo ko gamba kawaja kawana doyari mato lama chunsan yok marida lama o gonda ta kawaja so chonaso sonla ko mari konaso chu kareki ko na kawan bando ko na ngaso nyin doya sen roa da dimba ko lama ya yoyari loma ya doyari manche ki chu hie de hinasen hie kere lama mamboke 파 타는 거다. 대도 주시도 나게 망보던 현영아. 대도 듣고 주는 희야희요데 랍다마베 띠나도 더러반의 넘버지 가다 덴바 메게다 책이 더선통 연더 랍드 전지 주니도 책이 더선통 연더 감래 자반니는 매와게 통니 거르와 nga ane lebdu lama 샤프서는 로데 lama 샤프서선 데비드 근데 lama tamje lama the interview with gare ta lama mambo tere rumboji ke bomari nimaje garu moche zamtatola ko lomari din korani dana din ke ja hire din do nga han sang song nga habi ene lebdu lama nyamdo chejek tola da Berjik told Gaji in the Tini, Gaji in the Tanakano. Ama the tuning came so Lama in the Lama in the sound go there. Hansan, Tanga de Panjochas, and the Chazan, the lots at the Judo or Marikaraji in the Karamaji. Not so pioneered Tandrake, Kawakawa, Tonya, Kora, Lama get Dean told the dinner. Garba mumbling is on the Masa Tadrido. Lama, you dig the intertime, go the kern. Then go the kern. Tendriki Rana, then go the one take off. Tang Pechaga told Kimbo Maserka Lord, or Kimbo Masel and Garden Body, when the Garden Body Kimbo Maserka Homari, and Garden Kimbo Maserka Garden Body, Petsa Kimbo, then Kimbo Sancho Sambazon, Sahandoa, Lama and the Conny Pata Nigazo. Ga Abit, and calling Abit, it's your house at Abit. Abi Yogdiris and Garmoji Yogdin Saranga, Kimbo Masagate, Korek, Nichaka, Jabla, the demons had or to see Mama, Garmoji, Lama Kimbo Masari, care for Kimbo Masagan Garmoji, Desert Sakori. Then, not so pine parts of Sewa, the subcolor to do already. Then
The Kongi, Niela, the Garmoji should Sashava.
They have the not so point they here called it, and the Gabi Yumiri, Gabit, Abi say, I think I saw Kiminda, Abi Gagazon, Love of the Zewan gave the Abi Yum. Tundrukin, the Tundrusin, also Pila, Chula, Zondusin, the Yoko, the Mato Check. Dundrake Chipo Gabona or Yomari, and they said a lazy Kimori called it, and a Kantaya zone to choose zone to new to say at the Cassi zone to see not the Tava Jumjet, diligent mental call it. Then the zone to the pay, zone to the new to say at Pay Chamber, new to say at Pay Chamber. Kaju koma saja koma nyingma koma lama koma yonzo tamji niru kona the dinner sanje dwa tawaro then the had by you zone to see at kitchen body yabori nga take sem trohano ngara la zone to niru mina maginda niru the zone to see sa ko de nga sem hachang ge ngala gomon bama bo ba nga take ka monero nga di diligent kare mari di yara de nga monero
There's great merit in being diligent in the practice of Dharma. If I tell you some things about my homeland, I'm not saying these things to make a negative comparison of you, or to point out your faults, or to say anything about any of you. So don't take it personally. Here when we receive teachings, we have nice and comfortable cushions. We have fairly thick big cushions, and then we have butt cushions on top of those. And we're quite particular about our cushions, and we want to be comfortable. Where I grew up, there are no cushions. There might be a seat for a teacher, but basically, when you're receiving teachings, at the very most, there might be sheepskin to sit on. And I don't mean a mattress of sheepskin stuffed with something. I mean just a skin. Usually, Dharma is taught, especially if it's being taught to a group of people, is taught outside where I grew up. And the weather is not taken into account. So you're probably sitting on the bare ground to start with. And then if it starts to snow, well, you're sitting in the snow. And if it keeps on snowing, then you're sitting amongst the snows. And that's not seen as a big deal. We see this type of attitude mentioned in the sutras, where it says, sit on a low seat and listen with enthusiasm to the amrita of the teacher's speech, and so on. One would never have a particularly comfortable or fancy seat to sit on when receiving teachings. It would be considered kind of disgraceful. When I first came here, I was shocked and dismayed to see students sitting on the same seat, like the same bench or the same couch and so forth, as their teachers. I noticed this with Rinpoche, and I also saw this with Garu Rinpoche, that people would sit right beside him on the same surface, on the same couch. And initially I thought, well, they can't be his students, because if they were his students, they wouldn't dare to do that. We believed that if you were to sit on the same seat as your teacher, you would exhaust or use up all the merit you had accumulated for countless kalpas, that it would just get rid of it all. So initially I thought that the people who were doing this probably couldn't be Buddhists. They couldn't, And now I know better. I know that this is just what you do, and I'm used to it. In Tibet, we had so much respect for our teachers that in some cases, someone would even be the teacher of someone else and treat their student as their teacher. An example of that is a relationship between Khenpo Munsel and Gotchen Rinpoche. Khenpo Munsel, technically speaking, Khenpo Munsel was one of Gotchen Rinpoche's gurus. But from Khenpo Munsel's point of view, Gar Rinpoche was the guru. And he called him Gar Abe, which means beloved Gar. And he would put the cushions that Gar Rinpoche had sat on behind his own pillow as a blessing. And so, it would be impossible for someone to sit on the same seat as their teacher or treated casually. But it's not just about respect. It's also about the degree of exertion we are willing to put into the study and practice of Dharma. And if you look at the history, not just of our tradition, but of any form of Buddhist tradition, for example, the Sakya, Gelug, Kagyu, and Nyingma traditions of Tibet, you'll see that everyone in any of these traditions who has achieved the result has done so through tremendous exertion that entailed within it this type of imperviousness to transitory conditions.
I have a follow-up with regard to the paramita of generosity. And it is a question, but I'm going to just make a quick statement first. It's my experience that when I encountered people who grew up with the tradition of Buddhism, that they understand how to value, and I don't mean this in a business sense, but I mean in terms of actually giving even more than they can toward the teacher, the teachings, the place of the teaching, because they realize that it brings benefit to all sentient beings as well as themselves. And seeing that example, I've tried to follow it. So my question is this: because in the West now, there seems to be like two ways of doing things, or maybe a hybrid way of doing things, where there's a charge for the teachings. Now, if you can't afford it, you don't have to pay that amount to the government. If you can afford to pay more, that's what you do. And then you give offerings to the teachers. And so my question is this, sort of, is it up to each individual to decide where their generosity that they can, even if it's a high amount for them, where they can put it? Or, I don't even know if I'm asking this question correctly, but how can we best benefit the teachers and the teachings with our limited resources to the best of our ability?
The Jimbabwe, part of the Jimbabwe Kuala, the Moranga, the Nyamyo Hapana, the Nongpe Longpa, the Zaken Soke, the Vichu, the Jimbo Zigi. The Jimbo Zivake Tala, the Chu Shaken Namba down, the Nashingi Chusola, Jimba Gantuto, Pugi. Shall come to Topgyal. Nupchola Dedao Mare. The Nupchola de Chutso ke da chu di shoya la rin di dao trengo vido de Sacha Madrana me mong chawa ke trege mare. The Kandras of Gudo. Number check the na me sama ke so ke Depa Radene Kantutu Puju de Yana de Chutsoke da de Rao Shoyala, the Netranga de Rao Trego Udo Sewata, the Ne de Lakoyana, the Ne de Lamana Pala Puju, Chusol Shatek Jula Sopa Puju Yote, Kandaka Mompadilla.
Tate Korteki na Choranzo Dembari. Dala Dilomba de Tap Komdri Mewa, Kuna Kan, Charson so Dembari, Nambaki, Charson Nambaki, Chuyonzo, Sonam Tsosa Zone, Chasan Kan Yobate, Di Koranso Kan Yobat, Pacharte, second of them, so Gombata, Lamata, Travala, Mbune, Kala and Gormo and Goldo in the Dorna Gompa and Sopan Soji, the automatic now, Kurkoma, Consi Jagumari, Trekeri, Jama Deri, Burma Deri, Chasogata, Talent Deri, Ko Trekeri, Lama Tamjik Alambu, and the Go and the Mugo Lagomari, Don't Paratona, Tela, Yonjago, the Hakori, Sonam Sosa, Lama Tawan Chamna Lemna, Teleching Bugo, and Aranga Sonam Sosa, Payamba, the Hakori. Jamba da yada chupa da mala jamba de rangi go de ngaso jek kongsi jaya da ke da chi ko mari de yo da da charso chamar den do no so de yo mari de ngone men do da de yo mari so nam go so sa je cha de konso ngobi no ko so nam go so sa se ya de la interested hira men do de me cha de me li to la ya na so nam go so ma sa na chora ge ni ru go ne ripa ke ngone ta ne ke chora pe chu ripa nam chu chok chemo ge to ne ngara rang ge tom ne ba ke chu nyam ni se de ni ru da ele ya song ba de jing de drop ni ru se ne drum ne sa je ko kompa top yo sam ni den ri ke ga ni ru se thwa man do da chu la ga ko o sa ri che ro de kan do de du lama mambo ge la kan do chora soma 인지리 소 야미리 라마 mambo lama ga membo lama mambo 인지리는 하하 다 저랑 강 요마리 인지 저랑 강내 저마 인지 다 강제 그 말이 고시 그 강제 그 말이 전부 해가도 제 말이 다 콘솔 저랑 게这个 거리다 这个 야효들이 코나서 광주야 우리 럭처로 와 왕나는 저 주희는 저 这个 거리 다대 코나서 럭처리 대대 제 그리 마도 rangi ko khona zu tek mari la ga da ti nga chu cho ka kare se ke yo mi nge mi hi do na nga rang ke ka te ko cha se ke mi den ren sa ri ha ko mi zo de ma to te la pe tension ra won de chou chen bo se ke mi de Sekami, Tendrike, Jamalama Mambonga Ropa, or Ningi, Chora Kao Mari, Nature Ropa Jagos on it. Gomo Tontami, just a Tiki Lama Kajera, Jamik Lama.
La,
Jamik
Lama.
Lama Puri,
Oh,
Loma Jari.
Really?
Tajola Kanyo Mari, Ningi, Chora the Ropa Zogos on it. Ropa Lama, Kaja Soka Lama, the Trino. And Tangazo Ray the call it then the challenge of Kale, Jambala Tesa Con, Yarsonam Katsosaya, the Majambataya, Jaja Jana, Jaja just Jonasa, that Dijando Mepate Sare, Sonam Sosaja, the Condri, the Gina, Jam part of the Sambaton and Jambat so Jambala Yanchuja, the Margin Genitary, Jambataya, the challenge of Chuloda, Yori, Chuloda, Maloma, the Jambataya, the Trumble, the Jambataya, Mesa the Gagela Jambataya. Chuban Briate, there's a union rido, then the Tendrikela Choras automatic Takibi on the Debatana Boneta, not so good children, Yam living to the Chugona, Sonam Gatosan, Tata Katan, Hiabayama, don't give me about Mato, but Sony Kingdom Palo and Ramas in Naroba Song that tender, Michisonam Gatoda, Mimi, Sonica, the Sadagina. Not only Pioneer Chungo in the Jambati, Lobjan Secretary, Tina Yetaransoga Kanto, Zone Gina, and Chubambarius, son of Sosa and Bardagina, then a Mamba Marab Jimata, Pino Separi, that the chance of Compimari de la Mark and the God is on the Yorkshire Mari, that got to Yad and Saddle.
It's a word. When the issue, then the issue singing, Laka Mobo, Jachambo, Dilacheva, Mobo, that's all. Make jump on
Joda.
then the console the Lama, then the Kamba Yore, Gadri Yore, then the health insurance Yore, some of your part, the console, take a talking about it. Runji console, Deba Yore.
Re.
Console, the Mar Upola Jamba Sando Mayamba, console and Lakan Shayatan, then the Shacho Dabo. That Nupchoki, now what it's so dear.
Re, number is a curry in the Hamo, the desert to the
Drop the Dole, the track seven on here. Thing not in Yam, not children, the issue bucket, that's all. Yeah, Hakovi, console, the console, Kana, so Kanya, but Chucha Chip. Lock on the Poyak and most of
They think that's a pile and down, that then do bookery.
So,
They what the number, she's all mumble, Gangan chain, Dawson Tang, Goja, Chasar, or tell the Cheranso, some of the labor pay you in the airport.
Before you translate that, can I just add this little piece, which is if anybody has yet to pay for the teachings, they can see Matthew later, and we have an offering at the end of this teaching. Thank you.
well, you certainly opened up what Lama said was, what you say is very true. That there is a great deal of difference between the attitude and generosity of people from Buddhist cultures and Asian Buddhist cultures and people in the West. Basically, he said, so I'll say everything he said, and then I had something to say because it's simply, Lama Trotop said, it's simply that Westerners are unfamiliar with the custom of generosity. Especially, basically, the Westerners don't believe in the accumulation of merit. Most of you don't actually believe that it exists. You think it's a cultural thing. That statements like Talopa, sing to Naropa until you realize the meaning of the unborn, never be without the two wheels of accumulation, and so on. you hear that and you think, yeah, but no. Where I come from, basically anyone with means would give half of what they have regularly to the local monastery or teachers or temple or whatever there is. And no one would have to ask them or remind them. Wouldn't have to send out fundraising letters or even verbally requested. It was automatic. And this is true all over Buddhist Asia. It's true with Tibetans, it's true with Chinese people, it's true with Thai people as well. And the difference, I think, is simply in that they believe that doing this will enable them to gather the accumulation of merit, and they believe in the accumulation of merit. And so you never need to charge for Dharma events in Asian countries. People just give. In the West, as you indicated in your question, the situation is very different. For one thing, Westerners don't believe in the accumulation of merit. Westerners think it's a fiction that was created for purposes of fundraising and social manipulation. That's what most Western Buddhists believe, if they're honest. But then if you ask, do Westerners, okay, so Westerners don't believe in accumulating merit by making monetary offerings, do they believe in accumulating merit through diligent practice? No, you don't seem to believe in that either. The only thing you seem to believe in is figuring it out. You think that Dharma, the essence of Dharma practice, is being clever and figuring it out. And the hard work aspect, that's just some kind of Asian medieval hangover. And the generosity aspect is social manipulation and fundraising. To the point now where when a Lama, a Tibetan Lama, meets with other Tibetan Lamas, the conversation will often be, do you have students? And if you say yes, they say, are they Chinese or white? And if you say that your students are white people, then they say, oh, you poor guy. I'll give you some money. And actually, this really happens. Tibetan Lamas who have Chinese students, who have therefore lots of money, will say, I'll give you a few thousand just to tide you over. You know, do you have food to eat? Do you have a place to stay? And so on. It's known. It's not even, we're not talking about rumors here. It's an understanding all over the world. If you tell another Tibetan Lama that you teach white people, they will say, oh, you poor guy. And one Tibetan Lama, I won't tell you his name, but said to me, he said, I'll tell you what to do. Here's what you do. You got to sell tickets. That's the only thing those white people understand. They understand tickets. They buy tickets. They go to the movies and they buy tickets. They understand that. You got to sell tickets. If they want to talk to you, they got to buy a ticket. If they want to hear you teach, they got to buy a ticket. You're going to give an empowerment, you got to sell a ticket. That's the only thing they understand. Ticket sales. They understand that. That's the only way to get get money out. Well, obviously, I ignored that advice. I haven't paid attention to that. I don't sell tickets. But basically, Western Buddhists are not familiar with the idea of supporting a center, supporting a monastery, supporting a sangha. It's not that you don't understand the idea of generosity, because you do understand the idea of charity. That's taught in your Abrahamic religions. He said Christianity, but all three we would say. You do understand the virtue of giving to the poor, but you don't understand the idea of offerings, and you don't believe in the accumulation of merit. If you can learn to familiarize yourselves with that, then it will be good for Dharma in this country in future generations. Obviously, this generation, you're going to view things the way you view things, but it would be good if people could learn over time. And then what I said to him was, it's actually more complicated than that, or simpler, depending on how you look at it. You look at the size of Christian churches and synagogues. They're bigger than this. They're fancier than this. You look at the lifestyles of Christian ministers, Jewish rabbis, and so on. They're supported. Because their congregations believe in their religion.
And they put their money where their mouth is.
The reason why Western Buddhists, I'm sorry to say this, and he can't say this, but I can, and I'm going to. The reason why Western Buddhists won't support the Sangha, because most of you don't fucking believe in it. You don't really believe in Dharma. I'm sorry. You prove it by your actions. If you believed in it, the treasurer would be swimming in money, wouldn't have to worry about it. Why are Buddhist centers have so much trouble? Why do we need fundraising? Because Western Buddhists lack faith. Now you can hate me for saying it,
And they're suspicious.
but too bad. You don't believe in it. There's no problem. You want to start a Christian church? You look at I'm talking about New York State, which is a blue state. You look at the size of the churches. You go to a red state, they have their own parking lots. They're huge. I live on a street with 3 churches. They're all bigger than this. They've all got more money than we'll ever have. In a small village. You go to any town. You go to a red state, there's 10 of them. So it's not just, he's being very nice. But I'm telling you the truth. No. It's a lack of faith. Our parents all tithe.
For free on the internet, and they think, oh.
Yeah. It's because you wanted, it's, why pay when you don't have to?
Sonam Kibai song the Milarepa, Talagon Gomchilan Swan Jibin, Sanyan Temdra use. They are the sinking, Hajan Jimda sinking, young boys are sinking Mado. Then the Malare Nazo Payadina, Rungo, the Hina Yomari, Rungo Kasakala to the beggar, the Yamni sinking Mambo, Po Mo, Mambo. Check Rungo the Yeni Dwar and Circle Yuna, made the Dwar Yuna. Dan the Yamni sinki was saying on so Kalakin and Rogan. Taran bought a color Jalakon and Rona. Davata Dumchabi in the Kala Koran Kati Sazade Sajade Davata Lo in the Koran Jimdabi in the Jimdas and the Kalak Jimdak Sabahia or the Shatia or the Martia or the Tamuzon Mambo Mina Goko Ma Conso Grogestron Roto Mariva Kala Kati Sada data Dada Meja Kiti or Chata Pamjor de Road and the son of the Sosa
Lumba de la Romushu, the Sologina Chi. The Moncho, Losum Josun Dekin Gijina Moncho Jackson. You know, they member Chick Kerachin, Michopo Kerachin Chick, that Sopa, also the Losum Josun Gijina Zoki, Sopa, Sopa the Koran, me Chick. Jinda, Ding Ming Lagi, what's up?
Retela Haleva Yabondo,
You know,
then the Milarepa, they sung the Morilla Tambo Kangaran China, the Conrepesimo Petata, Ziseo Sakafomos in the corner of Kalatin, Conga de Kalas to the Kalagteni, then it's along the true, the Charawa, the Raga, Hendrin, the Raga, Kati, Kong take a Zalong to that Chimbo Nubaji, some do time you draw. Take a bit hard lebarin, then you conquer the sonong so judging borindo gone conquer draw pin, then Trala gom chin and 200 million Sanyam the year with temperature Hawaii, son the conquer Huang Jawali. Maso Payu did take the mount check you get low the chicaria, then the Yamnis and Kid Katiyu and so at the yard. Go enjoy in the yard carried any on the direction.
Another thing Lama said is, you know, in where I come from, people are very anxious or eager is a better word, eager to support those in retreat. So people who are doing a 3-year retreat or are in solitary retreat, to the point where if somebody sees a smoke coming from a distant mountainside, then they'll know that there's somebody in retreat there, and they'll actually load themselves up with provisions and just walk day and night to bring that person provisions. And it's not considered remarkable to do that. It's normal because they believe in what Milarepa said. In the case of Milarepa, his practice was obstructed by the fact that he had no food to eat. And a hunter who became his disciple, and you can read about him in the Psalms, called Chirawa, which just means hunter. So it's just, you know, but he's called that, the hunter. Brought him food, and by eating, Milarepa was able to untie channel knots, or I guess we would say blow them open, the way Lama's grandfather explained it, and gain further realization. So he sang a song saying that may the meditator meditating in the cave and the donor who lives in the village achieve awakening together. And we regard this not only as an aspiration, but as a prediction. And so people often will sing that line. I think it's the Malamka Kasukonso Tapadongyo. It's chanted at basically any time Kajupas gather together and recite aspirations and so on. And so it's understood, and it's understood, readily understood in most Asian cultures. And so Lama was saying it would be good, you know, if that practice could arise here, so that when people go into retreat, they have no trouble finding the sponsors. And then what I said, since I seem to be mouthing off today, is there are two groups of sponsors available to people who do long retreats. Many Westerners who do group retreats are sponsored by people from Taiwan. or other Asians. And then the other group has a name. His name is George Soros. George Soros's money, some of it, is used to sponsor people doing 3-year retreat. It goes through channels. You won't see George Soros's name anywhere, but that's one person. And I mean, it's got a different name, foundation, and so on, but that's where it's coming from. So that's what, I mean, obviously, one person. So there's one Westerner who's not even Buddhist, who is paying for people to do 3-year retreats. And so thank God there's one.
오늘 들으리 소나기 초사야데 나초가 하이 장장히도 소나기 초사야데 드렌다 히도데 히고 계자 튼로데 그 검사람이 잘나디나 소를 초총은 사스 대파 총은 빵 소는 그 초총총 니 사드기나 딘 제베데 계와 망보다 하 레바이 초 자chen 버스트린로 때제를 전화서 망보를 떼고 말이 Gyamtso the loved Lapa Yen Yonati, Yoni Yelati, Dendo, Remji Chunga, Gormoje, Gyambaton, Chubamber, Gyambaton, Chubamber, Sonam Sat, and the do with Jenna, then it don't put Chichi, Jechendo, Chincha, Jechondro, don't put Chichi, Jechendo, the Gondro, the Jachamber in Ranju, Sanji Kajatabana, Tomis on the Tosa and the Caps of the Compitiwa Jela. The Serma River some Sonam Gitso Bujasani, College of Jasitima, some Jason Saka, Lord Jori, Tepatana Gone, Dodo, and so Chuman saw Sonam Gitsosaya, the big kitchen body, then also Mendram Bukora, Mendram Balikap, so Mendram Burji Joti, put some boat and Yapo, Rabsen, Sangja, Temena. The soda, there's a new yard, like cow under was saying, Senat, Satan is on the for Desare, Yabu Yomari. Then the Gazi Sona good son, Yanchu, Margin Carisena, Della Sena Cornima. Sena, the Zani Cornima, Cheton Karimbuna, Boots are the Tijis and Rani, Marifanga treats her, Lena Reva, Budon. Then Sonam gets holding around the Yonka Yori, Chorangalina Reva Yujan, Mijano, Chorang Sosa, they can debit some Menkarima, don't debit Meva, Charma thing, so Nova Sanji, Shajatbak song, debit the Yonkari, then the sort the Chesa and the Sonam gets so Sadina. Yabo, the Del takes a con, Yabo, that tell the Chamber Tino Gomari, that Jananzo, Lord Rinani, Sora, Sosoke, Gonjo, the Lama Tamjila. Kasi it's automatic. That's so curricular. Mari curricular zena, teacher zena, they jamba mari. They are ngara automatic ngara ke senani pa lutando ne. They are chubam berdujine yapo did. And ngala curricular commander nga trainer ngala curricular command. Yinda the sara the chubam berdujina control the chubam ber lamata the social garden change lamata lozawa tamji pe garden chimbo nga so. One Johnny Garden Chamber, book pay Garden Chamber, the quality. Garden Chamber Johnny, to hear call the Lords at your call the Chena Batamjela. The song Garden Chamber, sending corrupted in the Sandatane, so now it's also the Yapo and other critical element. The Yapori thought that so Yapori. Kale Congo. Jambatomara, the certain zone is some days the percent told on the Tambon goes on Tokomaro. Then the Jamba, the Labori, the Jarsela and Lando. Sanchum de Lujan Tangun, Serumupunam, Mujik. Teta Lint November, Jambaton Jarsela and so on. Sanchum Togon, Sanje Togon, Luda Sola, some of Madon Morgora. A Luso, also Marcura. Jared Tondok song, the Jared Tondok. Jarba Tondok song, the Jab to make is on the Sancho Samba Chamber, Jack and the Sancho Samba Chamber, Dirihaka, the Pudamato, Salonjiro, or copy Jambatan, Jambatan, Jabo, Jambatan, Tran, the Lombatam, Chado, and the Koto is already Then call draw the Duru Hachang the draw yard. Duru Hachang the draw, Duru Hachang say at take out the focus Hachang, they were Manicamano, the Duru Hachang, Jinzi, Tazi, Tom de Matabila, somewhat Jaja for Sadum. Then the Jagat and Kaput on the Tenatang was our tang at the content tang, the Sanjo Samba, the Jamaican did the Tenatang. Then you conquer Sese Mosong, Gyamtso. Then you console Yam the dog. This is just about Jamaican.
So he said the same.
Jamaican de Conga, say more Gyamtso. Then Charas of Mandos, Charas of Deuce, Charas or Cheba such a you call Yardu do Conga Jarkan and the do and Jakari. Man dog or Maranka Norvogudu Samperte, Judge Sense Hadley, then the Cheba Kit Hadley, man dog. Then he jumped a night chirochi, then say more song, my chirochi song. Then he yak chinrogan, not so taman rogan. Then he yak, or ya cheraso song in chin and jacaris, and a cheras on Rohanga Tamja goris. Then the Tamja caress in a choice, or Tamja sena. Nye Thomas on the Buddha Choma dead. Dooms on the Rangaluyan dead. Rangaluyan dead on the race. Thomas on the Necho Choma the bottom near Jayukaris. Dooms on the Nasoyan Jayukaris. They cannot Drapsada ways. Then is Conrad Jam there, Kandrum Pedua, Sancho Sama. Then the Moke, Jakaris, Chora Caris in the teaching, also Yam the Rockays. Then they call number Durahakara, the song of Bogasaja. Then it is on the Langani, didn't conquer Transit Tamila says, Motam, go sit there, Jamba, Tetri, says, Moti. Then they Ramja. The job to make on the logic in the Topgyal.
Then the Choma, Bomo, Bucha, the consumption on the document.
Then they call the Bati and the Chore. There is just some chamber, that they machine and excited. Then it was the
Kalu Johnson, Bella, Jaga,
Jagal to the song, Jagal song, the Taput on Sapu Satire, Congo Mike, the Jin, the Chasa Jambaton, Jamaica. Then it did Jenny called Sancho Sambatin as a Trabara, then Jenny Young, Yaya, Jabog, Dingy, Houston Sauri. Then the Sancho Sambatam, Sancho do the Vija Tango, Lupon Golitam, Tango, Mupotam, Mucho Guri, then the Jambat Tanya, the Kachambori, Yachu Martin say at the Tandon, what it is.
It's important to balance our usual preoccupation with very high concepts, very elevated Dharma concepts, with an understanding of the importance of very, very simple and basic things. So, for example, in the words of my perfect teacher, it says, gather even the smallest accumulation of merit and avoid even the smallest wrongdoing. The accumulation of merit does not have to be a dramatic or heroic thing. It's when the custom is established, when it's a normal thing, then people will just naturally be giving. They'll give even a little bit. But if enough people give a little bit, that's a lot. Similarly, the avoidance of wrongdoing does not have to be composed of grandiose gestures of renunciation. It's simply avoiding avoidable acts of wrongdoing that anyone can, if they think of it, avoid. We have to remember that even offering a very little amount or giving a very small amount will have a tremendous, a much greater result. So, for example, someone who offered a previous Buddha a handful of beans was reborn as a result, a Chakravartin, as many times as there were beans in his hand. And this is why we do the mandala offering practice. and why we're supposed to be very, very attentive to the materials we use. People who value the accumulation of merit, who can afford it, will use a gold mandala plate, or if not a silver, or at least copper. And only if they can't afford anything else will they use a brass one, and so on. And they'll offer not just grain, but jewels and semi-precious stones and so on, and actually not hold on to these things afterwards, because they believe in the accumulation of merit. Even though the gesture of offering is done to beings that they can't see, they still believe in it. So it's important that that people become acculturated to this. It's not so much a matter of one person or another person being extremely generous as it becoming the norm, becoming a normal part of a society. Because if it's not a normal part of the society, if it's not spontaneous, if it's not something that people do naturally, if one has to basically squeeze donations out of people through aggressive fundraising, that's not the accumulation of merit. That's kind of like taxation, and that's not the point either. Now, in talking about this, I'm not soliciting donations here. I'm not asking you to give me money. I'm trying to make a point about the general issue. Another aspect of this is appreciation, that you appreciate those who teach, those who make it possible for you to practice and read the texts and whatnot. Since you brought it up initially when you first asked your question in terms of the paramitas, there's another aspect of importance to this as well. The paramitas, the order in which the paramitas are presented is one of increasing difficulty. So the idea is that through the practice of generosity, you gain sufficient merit to be able to practice moral discipline, through which you gain sufficient merit to be able to practice patience, and so on. There is a definite sequence to them, which means that if we can't practice generosity in some way, we can't even hope to begin the real practice of moral discipline, patience, diligence, meditation, or wisdom. With regard to generosity, in the 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas, Tomei writes, if for the sake of awakening it is necessary to give up one's head and give away even one's living body, what need is there to say that it is the practice of a bodhisattva to give away all their external possessions and so on? This is exemplified, of course, by the story of the ancient king, Gyamtso Kundin, who was in India, but I don't know his name. Gyamtso is Vimala, but I don't know what his name was. And Gyamtso Kundin is famous. He was a bodhisattva and an emanation of Avalokiteshvara, who gave, in the end, he gave away everything, even his eyes, his life, and so on, in order to stop a Mara king, a sort of a demonic king who was ruling a part of what is now Tibet. And Gyamtso Kundin kind of overcame the tyranny of that king through sacrificing everything he had, not for the sake of himself, but for the sake of many people. And he gave away everything, his family, his life, and everything. So Yeah, that's an example. That's a joy, yeah.
대충 좋았잖아.
I have a question online. There's
Oh.
nobody in here.
Okay, what time is it?
It's 3:25.
Oh, okay, I can't tell.
So it's from the same person who asked the other question. So there's another question before that from Norjin Lama. And do you think that the parts of the white Kachiri practices that were lost in the Cultural Revolution could ever be recovered, either physically or mentally?
That the ngomale yapake kachu kamoke salonke chedam powake chela sopa de so maombala so ragiremes.
다 마음바다 같이 라나 와는 거 주바데일 가래 커버로 티전 더 완전 lon전 데일 가래 커버리 텐데 텐데 요마로 다 라시 바리 때 와는 티전 농종 그로.
It's hard to say because the lineage for their specific empowerments and transmissions will have been lost.
And then there's one other question. If there's nobody else in this room that wants to ask a question, I'll proceed.
If there is one, there's someone.
I'll wait then.
You want to ask the online question first? Or?
No, this person asked a question already, so this is their second question.
Okay.
Go first.
I just wanted to thank Lama Tratok and also Lama Yeshe for this teaching and being patient with us. I in particular am a beginner and I don't really understand much of this, but I want to ask a question about something that I think I understand. I may not understand it, so forgive me. Lama was talking about the bodhicitta that would be received from the guru.
Okay, yeah.
And that there were two aspects of this bodhicitta, and I don't know whether this is I would assume this is absolute bodhicitta. And then the aspects were described as clarity and emptiness, but then there was a male and female aspect. And then also there was mention of this aspect is somewhat kind of integral to the guru himself.
Yeah.
So in my very simplistic mind, some ways I understand father and mother to be separate. In some ways, maybe emotionally, but also in some other way I may understand there's a union. But can Lama talk more about this aspect of the guru or the
the Sangha Tani Mashaba Church. Chidonsa that the Nange Wong, Dongwe Paka Wong Shuwe Kapsayina, Lama Yabyung Gyamtso, Savate, not Gyamtso, the Kamala Songyo. The doggy consultant on Yedam, not Aliam consultant on New York. De Soposhina Mato, not so Jamba, Ninja, some circum, Lama Yabyung, Donna Tile Kalmage, Damare. The Ming bodhicitta yambala, the Kong Hamagoa. Then they mentioned that done the lot of Yeah, it's you're not to blame. It's a little confusing. Okay, bodhi means awakening. And chit or chitta means mind or heart. It can actually be used for the physical heart too. So bodhicitta in the sutras is used in two ways to refer to relative bodhicitta and absolute bodhicitta. Relative bodhicitta is also two things. It is the aspiration to achieve perfect Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings, in order to establish all beings in Buddhahood. And it is the implementation of that aspiration through the practice of the six perfections. Absolute bodhicitta in the sutras is defined as the, we could say, the wisdom of an Arya in even places. So the first level bodhisattva actually generates absolute bodhicitta through their realization in meditation. But the term bodhicitta or awakened mind is also used in Tantra. And in Tantra, it also has relative and absolute bodhicitta. Relative bodhicitta in Tantra is primarily sexual fluids. Because in Tantra, awakening is achieved through the recognition of empty bliss, which is tantric absolute bodhicitta. And that depends upon the proper use of, as we see in this empowerment, the retention, distribution, and so forth of sexual fluids. So when it talks about the white and red bodhicitta, it means the bindu exemplified by, but not exclusively, exemplified by the sexual fluids of the father and mother guru. And here it's just imagined. Now, the unity of emptiness and lucidity that you spoke about is one of the four unities referred to in the text, where it talks about the unity of appearance and emptiness, lucidity and emptiness, bliss and emptiness, and awareness and emptiness. Specifically, Lama said that when you're imagining the guru in the sky before you, you think of that guru's nature as the undifferentiated unity of lucidity and emptiness. And when the guru enters your heart and he sort of splits into two, one being male and one being female, it's not that he becomes more, like there's more guru. And it's not that he's divided from himself. It's just that the unity of emptiness and lucidity, instead of being represented by one body, is represented by two bodies in union. Okay?
This question would be really good to follow that one.
Okay.
Does the white and red bodhicitta, as it fills our channels, remain distinctly red and white? Do we visualize it as a fluid composed of light? How does it emit from the mother and father harukas?
Who was asking this? Is this
I know.
who is it?
Bodhi Pixel, I don't know who it is. It's the first person who maybe we shouldn't address that one. I hesitated to ask it, but just so you know that it was there.
Well, I'll ask him and he can choose whether or not to, how much to say. Nange, de tumoma yemba wong show kapsa, lama yavyong ke Johnson karma de, don't sa cha, de ne long cha, de ne tile cha, de ne lobo tanche, bapo buka sunchela, chapiore. Chak sawa ke kapsa, karbo da marbo de ni drema, manchata, ngo chik de dregiore de down. Chak sawa ke kapsa, dene jutsi ki ranjan de negi yore, yana uchi ranjan de negi yore, kanra.
Tade chige kandogosa da tap de ore song ya da e detail hu chembo che song ma song cho samari tap de ore pa song ya na kamar ko te ji dimanda wada dene ngo po da tropa sima zen da wada che nzen yu pa ke toni samo ta ma song toni dene che toro che song ya cho sari dor dun.
Basically, when it fills your body, it's undifferentiated or homogenized. So it would be a mixture of white and red, so I guess pink. And it's not actually a liquid. We use the analogy of liquid because it's using something with which we're familiar, because we pour liquids, we know how to pour water. And so it's an image. But it's not actually a liquid. Don't think of it as a substance. It's not really it's a substance. So it's more like light that can be poured.
It was Peter, by the way.
What?
Peter. The person that said it.
Oh, Peter.
Peter.
Mm-hmm.
So I just have like a kind of more simpler question. So the paramitas, what you said about the merit being, it's more difficult to do the later ones. I find myself in a lot of opportunities to practice patience, and I feel like, of course, I'm not even versatile bodhisattva, but when we're aware of these opportunities, should we prioritize those ones? Like, let's say patience over generosity, or do we just start with generosity and then we perfect that and then go?
The Chetansa Lama ke Somba no Jenge, Paroto Chimpa Druk de Le Lawa ke Chote Uzumbio, Jimbala Tene Sotuma Tene Zopala Sopa ke, Gore Ngepa Dawo Yosumito. Matzo ke Chetansa Yena, Paroto Chimpa Druk no ne, Matzo Tapa Saya ke Goka Yopate Zoparis. So Jimba Tong Nunare, Manunayare, Zobagongo with us. Zobagon Gobaki, Goka, Matso Soyanaya, Tapa Ragiores. They endo de Soso ke Jimba Dam Sutrum, Tamachina, Zoba Gomatigas.
Re, da de ngone janin de kare, kare rin de kare sina, percent drop na ni jing yam ni yabu si tamna. Hal le ba ki sam jama jaba pinto jongare, dena data ke jetso de chora dembari, zuba gon taga de peke chimbori. Dena mama na zuba, dena chana sa korwa da jing chasa de ja che pada pomo da nyam de drogo na zuba de me to mrawa kiri. Ni ka da pinto zuba yabu na pinto chimbori. Then Madan some Zuba Saya de la Hirabu, part of the Sambatoka, the Hirabu. Some Limba Otox in the Zuba, Jan, the Samotana, Zuba Saya de Gayam, Tankin, Chula Druami was Zebari. Then the Karayana Sandoko, the mother, then the Tankin, the control, Laparta line, Shikamari. Then the Zuba de la Hiragori. Zuba de meet Mromari, Kadu and the Zuba de Gongori, Dina Labar the Chutravia de Zuba Gong, Mother Zuba Go, Simji, Tundro Socha, Batoma, Socha Katin, Tundro, the Zuba Gomyate, Gomtana Yabor, the Magomna, Tundro Seriate, Young Chori, Labar the Mother Zuba Gom, Tropo Tromo, the Zuba Gom Zazana. That is all the Zuba Gomya, the Zuba, the Chot Japan, Chota Japan, meet Mromari, the Demari, Zuba Gomja, the Koko Yabori, Zuba Gongori, Yabori.
Well, as you say, while in general there is a sequence to the perfections, there are aspects of all of them that we can practice as the opportunities arrive. And as your question indicates, there are numerous opportunities for the practice of patience in anyone's life. For one thing, anyone who lives in human society will, on a daily basis, have numerous opportunities to practice patience, because in order to function and get along with others, there has to be give and take, and therefore you have to be able to compromise. At the same time, however, like all the other perfections, patience needs to be practiced with intelligence. And that's why it's often said that all of the first 5 perfections have to be practiced with at least a basic level of the 6th, which is prajna. But in this case, it means using your head, thinking. We can't force patience. We can't practice patience with, the best English word for this is naivety. The Tibetan is a little stronger than that. It says stupid insistence. Stupid insistence is when you force yourself to be patient with things that you just can't be patient with, and you're not going to be patient with them. And then you force yourself as long as you can, and then you blow up. That's not good. So you have to really assess what's best in each situation. And that's why patience has a certain level of complexity to it. But definitely, we need patience in so many aspects of our lives. We obviously need patience in dealing with other human beings. All human beings, in one way or another, at one time or another, are going to require patience on the part of those who deal with them. We also need patience with Dharma. Dharma is not always fun. Sometimes we have to endure it. Sometimes we have to be patient with the difficulty of it, both the difficulty of practice and the difficulty of understanding. We also have to be patient with non-human beings, such as the animals and insects that with whom we interact, because patience in their case means not losing sight of their needs and taking their needs and into account. And especially, we have to be patient with those people we think of as friends, like boyfriends or girlfriends and other friends. Friends and romantic partners, the closer the friendship, the more patience will be required. So yes, we have to begin with the practice of patience. Yeah, we need that from the beginning.
Gyamtso, tel mari tata de charan so ko nyong jere tata sanjit samba ko ta ko bula atisha so nyong wa pin da atisha ko ta ya nga bula rog thauti rondu me tin rog thauti ta tara ka long pin sa le nga rondu me te na bu ma ka ta nga lama chimbori pin da dari zon pe ya po se kare te nga zuba ta la kare ta zuba ta la kare pe nyin ka chimbori nge zuba ta malo le zokari sa concentrate ne azara ngare ke pizori ngare ka azara dukya pe ma comfort so ma dopore azara re kong ke hyapsa chi da de zuba gomsa teni pula compare pula pem de kong hyapsa le pugma pe dukya re tin namya ko yabo mozoke control tsawore long tsawore dukya khona se do mare yalan se do mare tende ke kong hyapsa le yore teni kong nga ke de bu de pe ma yabo ta ngara le yabo zonki janja ore tinge azara thi da da ma thi ne diksa ore ta nga zoba de la sa mari kong ko tende se sa ke lo jo na chora sembra ko nga chuji ki nga ore nga chora nga zoba go do ri
There's a famous story about this with which you may already be familiar. In the later 10th century of the Common Era, the West Bengali Pandit Atisha Dipankara went to Tibet, and he spent the last years of his life there. He didn't want to go to Tibet. He was commanded to by Aryatara in a vision. She said, "You've got to go to Tibet." And so he went to Tibet, but he was concerned. Atisha's main principal practice was Mahayana mind training. And so he really was very assiduous in making sure he had irritants in his environment so that he continued to develop patience, because he saw that when you're in a privileged position, when you become like a Dharma teacher and you're treated nicely by everyone and everyone defers to you, it's very easy to become so cushioned or isolated from irritants that you might lose the faculty of patience, which needs to be exercised. If we don't exercise patience, then we lose the habit of being patient. So you can't cultivate patience without irritants. So he thought that when he went to Tibet, since he was invited by the king of part of Tibet at that time, that he was a famous Pandit in India, he thought that when he got to Tibet, he would be very, very well treated and deferred to. And he was quite worried that it would spoil him, that he would get spoiled. And so he found the most objectionable, rude, disobedient, fractious, and quarrelsome person in his part of India, in West Bengal, that he could find. And he got this guy to agree to come with him as his attendant to Tibet. And then he went to Tibet. And one of the first things that Atisha discovered was that in spite of the fact that he had gone there by royal invitation, was a learned pundit, one of the greatest scholars of India, Buddhist India of his time, people were angry with him. They were rude. They lacked any courtesy. They treated him with disdain, disrespect, and or they just ignored his needs, his most basic, needs whatsoever. In short, he realized that the people of Tibet were so difficult. I think that's the nicest word, difficult, that he said to himself, boy, there was no need for me to bring that. He said this is perhaps not an uncommon experience that the teachers from one Buddhist culture have when they go to
Beatrice has a question.
Okay.
Well, we're circling back a little bit, but it's a little different. Can you ask Lama about acts of service, i.e. helping out, center, etc., how they are valued as generosity and merit generating? Better than giving money, question mark?
What's helping out what?
Well,
did she say helping out centers?
Acts of service, helping out center, etc.
Okay.
Right, in general.
general that the chuzo ke zamwa zoya dan shebjisha dan detsok dan lamana age shebjisha de zo sagere bes jimba tamjure bes
소나 저 자체 못 사그랬다. 대게 자란 속에 추초나는 영 상마조야다 레가레야다 자란 속에 골모티고 말이 라마소의 협서야 보셔야다 라마의 협서 현재는 침보 라마소 제현의 그 유미히데 대서 상마조야다 되네 대서 가르고 로파 가르고 호드저 그협야고 대서 강탑들세야다 되네 추초의 가베 간다 대라 대서 로파시 다 로파 세레 갑살라 갑레 자란 속모네 대파 다나 이치 그거는 로파세 레가 레로 탐지라 보더무조 나랑 가두 오나 나라랑 레가 가르시 거다나 시 나랑 그 미히로나 추초나나 두케 탐지라 네 레가 가르고 how can I help you 저 그야 야보시 네 레가시 차디와 셈네 기보 쪼아데 데버고니 나랑 그 소남 그 초야보 사탑선들은 야보 리송 산네 데니 쪼나데 데버고니 로탑나 되게 소나고 저 자체모 사거나 사마이 지자던 소나게 침보 사거 소는 지어로데 자세 혀와라 사게 할레바게 소나고 저 자체모 사거 데라 베카 제 추바 맘버나 전화서 그 뒤전에 메바트리 손도라 되게 소나고 저 자체모 오네 사거리 양의 책 세가고 메시가고 레나 레와시 yang nge chamo se jau chuso se jau yang chuso ka ngala ya po se mang se kan ra dundu ke ke lin rewa khira se ni mari ngara ka thap thap de chama zo sang ju chama zu nan ra lang chama zu nan ra khethen chama zu nan ra zu chali de la lin rewa me bo on de ngara gi sonam cho sa be chi de yin ngara ge yom ba chama zo be chi de yin ndi ngara ge chudo da lama tham ji la chupa bal yin san ne ko yak chen bo go ni Колом на борта багон ротовят пекетим.
That's a very good question. And it is in this regard that people here do very well. Because you accumulate the merit equally through service as you do through financial or other offerings. So when people clean a Dharma center or part of it, when they set up a venue before events, when they inquire the needs, for example, of the resident teachers, or when they inquire of the people who the administration of the center, what type of work, what kind of volunteers they need. When you provide any form of assistance to those who are running the center, to the teachers, to the people who arrange the venue, to everything, setting up the sound equipment, arranging the shrine room, and obviously things like providing meals, cooking for people. All of these accumulate merit in exactly the same way that financial offerings do. It's exactly the same sort of thing. So as a general rule, service is just as meritorious an activity as financial donation. But it's important, so you know there was going to be a but. There's always a but this weekend. But it's important when you serve to do so in a way that fits easily into working with others. So it's important to do it in a way that doesn't bother others or interfere with others' service or others' exercise of their own duties. So when you volunteer at a Dharma center, you should always consult with other volunteers, other workers, and find out exactly what's needed. And also, it's important to get along with one another and not to become competitive or prideful. As with any accumulation of merit, it can be spoiled by pride, by boastfulness, or by possessiveness. If you become territorial about your contribution, then you spoil or ruin the merit that you might otherwise accumulate through contributing. So therefore, it's important when volunteering, when engaged in service, to remind yourself frequently, I am doing this in order to gather the accumulation of merit and purify my kleshas. I am not doing this in order to destroy my merit and accumulate more kleshas, more jealousy, and more ego.
Mone vegana ran samya de kechen borida. Tatezo de kecha nawa mundoro ran samya. Ran samya de pe kechen bori karesena ran sangje ran texare ya strong macha yenda ropa zo tokomari tambo. Karesena ran ke dedok chorwa de hakone yege dedok de chorwa hakori deke ropa zo tokori. Then tambo ran samya de kechen bori sanjo sabatam ji mone vena tambo tanja he yenda sanjo sambasa ya deke yendo dokada san ko karesena ran sangje pe chi de hyokya ko de sanjo sambate ya then tambo ran te sar samno ton rang ke sonam ke chosa ke rang ke degde mi to tham bi ta ke yu ta bu chi de yen samne te zar ya so bo ngarang na strong ma cha ko de samno to ya ke chi mori deni yin samno don ri je de sanjo samba jarse Gyamtso yang ke semji konda ta semji la namba mambo chenpo he ko de dong bu de ni semji batsa jaboda semji ron ko da ngaso chunga de jaboda semji kyo ko de gare sena sanje ke sanje jambe yang tawa tada sancho ke semji somganani hai sancho ke semji gonso na tambo khon sangye da semji lüdi da de khon sangye da de na ge tambo ngone ta ne rang te sare dikdap jango do ngalpe dikdap jango do samnira ke samnore tongyu teni rang te la teni yena pha ja chera to ra tambo rang je khatsa hingi ro kom de di sart de samno tongye na pinto chere tambo ni yin samno tongye thumka mari ta ka hon zo je te pa chi mu ka hon de ja chi mu hi ko de
It sounds somewhat ironic, and is in a certain way, it doesn't sound very nice. But we need to think of ourselves when we practice the accumulation of merit, such as engaging in service, making financial contributions, whatever we do for the benefit of others. We need to ironically think of ourselves first. And the reason for this is that you can't help others unless you're strong. To help others consistently in a lasting and in a long-lasting way, you need to be strong. Which means that we need to constantly maintain the motivation that is really what we call king-like bodhicitta. Now, when the bodhicitta as a motivation is taught, we somewhat disparage king-like bodhicitta. We say that the best is shepherd-like bodhicitta, where your aspiration is to bring all other beings to Buddhahood first, and then only achieve it yourself after each and every other being. And then intermediate is captain-like bodhicitta, where you bring all other beings and yourself to Buddhahood simultaneously. And we say that king-like bodhicitta, where you achieve Buddhahood in order to be able to liberate all other beings, is the worst. And that's true in terms of the selflessness of motivation. But in practice, to really help others in the ultimate sense, you have to achieve Buddhahood first. Even though bodhisattvas like Avalokiteshvara and Manjushri generated shepherd-like bodhicitta and wished to bring all other beings to Buddhahood first, to do that, they've had to unwillingly accept achieving Buddhahood. They're Buddhas. We're not yet. So they've had to accept the fact that in the end, in order to bring us to Buddhahood, Manjushri had to become a Buddha in order to do it. So whatever your fundamental motivation is, whether you really only want to help others, or whether you want to help others and you want to gather the accumulation of merit so that you can achieve Buddhahood and thereby really help others, you need to be strong, and you need to gather the resources within yourself that will enable you to help others.
That's 359.
Okay, that's it. Thank you. Oh, that's all. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So, dedicate. Sonam Deye Namje Sefa Nye Tone Nyebe Dana Banje Yega Namje Bala Trupa Ye Sepe Sonen Rowa Yo Gewa Leye Jewoga Sona Yeshe Tsozo De Sona Yeshe Le Zang Tamba Kunye Toba Yo Sanjo Simyo Rumbo Je Maje Pana Jejo Jipa Nyamba Mepa Ya Kone Rondu Bewa Yo semje tamje teda Tombara yo sanjo samba ganda sarjo ba teda kanje molandro ba yo sanje reje tsunze tambe ka yarga duya do le pa Sabje mezo deva sangha ju sije tsantara jabe praye yo. Thank you, Lama.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
It's 고사리. We can kashi 고사리. It's the gorbon saya.
Todas.
We can kashi 고사리.
Hacha, 안 돼, 이제 오늘 뭐지?